Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit on the punny side. We're going to be covering our bases. Quite literally. I know it's a very basic thing to do, but we got to get it covered. So, jokes aside, we are now at the stage where I needed to make bases. I have 2 sculptures and many more on the way, because I'm doing the adventure of foray into trying to do some fine art type of sculptures, 3D fine art sculptures, producing them on a 3D printer, and then doing post-production work, and then cleaning them up into something a little bit more. This is more lowbrow art, this is more high art, somewhere in between there. So, whichever way we're going, it requires a different base for different situations. So, I was playing around with different types of base styles and different materials and how to finish them off. So, let's start with the most basic of them. We are going to go with this guy right here. I designed, this one has a little bit of a balance between the actual figure and the base. It's a very simple balance. I just wanted to make it look like it was sort of like a globe shape for the base, because moon and earth, that sort of relationship. This is down to earth, touching it. This is floating up there. So you get the idea. So even on the silly side, this is this was trying to find that balance between them. And so I had 2 different ways I could make it, and I've since fallen in love with this one way of printing this guy. The standard smooth print, which, as you can see, I sanded it down, trying to knock down some of the layers. And this was done at a 0.2 millimeter print layer depth. Nothing fancy. I did knock down the top layers here because it just I knew there was going to be some stepping, and I wanted something of a slightly smoother finish, especially when I go through my post-production work. But I also thought, well, what happens if I just need to finish it off? And so I have a couple different ways in which I was working on trying to figure out how to do this. One way is, since I was painting this, I was going to paint the base, so smooth works. The other way, well, what happens if I have just a colored PLA that would be kind of fun to have as that contrast? And I don't think that works, for numerous reasons. One being is that this is very plastic looking, which I have no problem with. But when you're trying to go for that realm of where does this become elevated above, no pun intended there, elevated above the basic material with just the design, or do I need to add more? And so I went through a couple material options, and this one was a good one for me, because this one I think needed to have a textured base. And so the basic material, not so much. The fuzzy wall print works well with this almost smoother surface, gives it more of a softer, natural look versus that machined look, which is what I was going for with this one. But finding the right tone is important. This one was like this one was, I believe, like an oiled patina sort of paint, and it works well contrast wise, but material wise it doesn't work as well as just straight flat black, because this still has like this high gloss shoulder, and I think it would detract from the basic necessity of a base. But I still wanted to have like a nice clean look to it, other than just like a square or something like that. So, and these guys are pretty nice. It was pretty dialed in. This one I had to add in the holes manually for the actual sculptures, but these guys I dialed them in to be exactly the right size for a 1/4 inch dowel. Same thing with this guy. Had to add it in manually, clean it up, do some post work, but it works well. Now the big question is on these guys, what material is better? Because I'm not going to lie. I can print in wood PLA. I can stain in wood PLA. I can use a wooden dowel and the things will match. And this was one of my tests. But I think it depends on the actual model itself too, because that effect doesn't work well with this one. This needs to go with something a little bit more on the pure organic side, or even more towards the higher art side, but this would not work with this one right here. So finding your base for sculptures is important, and this is a whole big design process, because I was trying to come up with a way of streamlining this, especially when I have, you know, a lot of a series. I want similar bases. So if this was a fine art sculpture, I would have sculpted this one thing and then made a custom base just for it. But when I'm dealing with a series of this work right here, I think this type of sculpture base is going to be better, because this, actually this would probably do well with like a bust of some sort, something that looks a little bit more figure related. But this mechanical looking process that looks softer, has a flat black finish, which I have yet to see in PLAs or ABS, that looks that flat. I think this is the way to go. Little design thing. These guys are fantastic on the design side, because I was playing around with feet, trying to see how I would make them look well. And I think this 5-footed design is amazing. Not much to it, but it's very clean. I mean, it sits well. It still has like little subtle gaps there that, other than going straight down. The only downside is that it does create a ton, and I mean a ton, of rafts or supports. Which this is a fantastic support. It just pops right off. But I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections of this raft here, and this is not a lot of material, but it's a lot of physical material. So right now I'm playing around with trying to reclaim some of that. Like this is one that I've taken flattened out, like this guy right here. And I've been cutting them into little sections and then starting to shape them out for other little things, whether I do manual compression, or this one is going to be whether I take them and start to shape them out manually. But that's a whole other video, or whatever. This is just reclaiming material. But I really like these bases. This is one where I sprayed the flat black on the bottom, did the oil finish on the top. So I need to figure out exactly where these work the best. But I think, as a whole, I think flat black is going to be that's going to be my jam. It doesn't matter what PLA I use, so if I can find this cheap gray, this is fantastic. The support here, the rafts, there's not a lot of droppage, there's not a lot of over texturing or inclusions. And even then, at 0.2, this is relatively smooth. There's not a whole lot of stepping. So I don't need to feel a necessity to overly clean this up. Just sand it down so I got a little bit less stepping here, especially if I'm going to do some painting. And I mean, like I said, 1/4 inch works well. Now for the support itself. With wood PLA, I think wood is the obvious choice. With more organic sculptures, like this guy, wood is the choice, because I can paint that support flat black, and then it's part of the piece. So I think wood is the good support, your go-to dowel support for this, especially since it's lightweight, it's easily replaceable if need be, and it's a good option all around, because I can sand it and shape it with minimal tooling and work. This guy, on the other hand, that wood support does not work. So right now I'm looking at options. I found a 1/4 inch aluminum dowel. It's lightweight, it's strong, and it does fit in these posts. Post-production wise, it might be a little bit, it works a little bit better because this is a man-made material connecting to a man-made material with, right now, with an organic material. Doesn't fit. Having a man-made metal dowel to support that is fantastic. If I could find 1/4-inch brass, that would be amazing. But I think the smallest one I can get is maybe 1/8-inch brass, and I don't think that's strong enough to support this. Like, even as minimal as the weight of it is, I think it would have longevity issues long ways, unless it's a small support. And I want this one up higher. I think I like the height of this versus, let's see here. So this one's about an inch shorter, and so that's fine. I just don't think that one, this one definitely needs to be a little bit higher off that base. I think it gives a visual necessity to be that much higher. It's a small thing, I know, but there's a balance here that I think would work, especially if I hand paint this and do sort of like a graffiti style design on the base here with intense colors that I'm going to be using on the sculpture itself to make the muted grays, the muted bluish grays up in here really intensify with reds and reds, blues, red inside here, you know, the sharpness of white of the teeth, yellowish white of the teeth, which I'm going to use yellow with like white tips on there. So it's got a huge amount of color that it's going to have in elements that I got to balance, that I think needs to have that sort of a look to here. And speaking of 1/8 inch, this is 1/8 inch steel, which works well for this small shape here and this small of a gap. 1/8 inch brass is softer than this, so I don't think this is gonna, even though there's half the weight for this sculpture, I don't think it'll, like I said, I don't think it's good. I think there's too much distance. It would just cause it to easily deform under the slightest amount of pressure. Whereas this guy, like, I'd have to go with steel, and I don't think the steel works well. It could, but I don't think it does. So I think I'm going to do the 1/4 inch aluminum for this guy. So that way it has the thickness of that support, has the strength of steel, has that shiny look to it, but it doesn't include a massive amount of weight into the piece that's not needed. So lots of things to discuss, to think about on this guy. I don't know. Give me some thoughts. Give me some reactions. I'd love to hear from anybody else that would have suggestions on what they think looks good on this, because this is the adventure. Is trying to figure out what works best for everything that I have. And then I think on the next one I'll be doing the actual painting and seeing how this guy works. This guy right here is just a nice airbrush type of effect, where I got the darkness going up to the dark black going up to the red, so it still has that red tone to it. So it's nice and clean. I don't think I need to add more color into it. I think this is good by itself. The way that I was able to highlight and shadow this piece, I think works well. So I think this is done. That's a good first foray into it. So if I can figure out where I want to land design-wise, because this is fantastic. I have about a dozen drawings with ideas along this lines, or along this sculpture, and I really like the organic feel to it that I can get. It's nice, it's clean, it's in keeping with my branding standards, or like my the way that I make work. And I have about a dozen sculptures that are almost ready to be done, and I should start doing some videos of some of the ones I have drawings of. But I think we're gonna go ahead and kill this video, as I think I'm all done with it, with what I was discussing. Yeah, we got all of our bases covered. So, good job. And then, yeah, and that's good. So, next video I'm going to talk about reclaiming some work, reclaiming some of this and how some of the processes I'm going through. Other than that, I think we're good to go right now. So, more on the next video.